Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Kat Schwarz. She's the founder of Compassionate Healing Services. She's also a Reiki Master of Masters, spirit medium, mindfulness teacher, and certified trauma educator. So, Kat specialized in the holistic treatment of physical and mental health conditions and skillfully integrates her extensive professional training, personal experiences, and spiritual gifts and tools into a powerful healing session. So, this is my brief introduction of you, Kat. But my favorite question to ask for everyone who watches these videos is asking my guests about how would they describe them? Who are you in your own words in this very moment? What would you say?
Grateful is the first word that comes to mind first for being invited onto this lovely show. It's so nice to meet you and such an important conversation that we're going to have today. And if I could add on to your bio, just to be, to sum that all up, I'm a former physical therapist. I was a physical therapist for almost 20 years before transitioning my healing work more into the energy medicine, honestly, because of what a dramatic difference it made once I opened my mind and attuned my hands to Reiki. And I am now, so holistic healer is the broad term. I am a complex trauma and suicide prevention specialist. That's the real goal, is to save lives. And, and it comes from my own personal battle, right? Any healer that's really able to help others or inspire others to their own healing has done the work themselves, right? Those are the people who are the greatest benefit. So I'm happy to count myself among many, and excited, grateful and excited. That's who I am in this moment.
Yes.
But it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey to those positive, uplifting emotions.
Yeah, how wonderful to hear that. And I love when you say, when I open my mind to Reiki. So how did that happen? When did you come across Reiki?
Well, I came across, so I was as I mentioned, I was a physical therapist for almost 20 years. Yeah. Concurrent with that, almost exactly, was my non-belief. I called myself an atheist after being raised Catholic. Which certainly Reiki is not part of the disciplines that that you're taught when you are raised in Catholicism. And as I decided after the death of my father to let go of my my Catholic faith, I became very scientifically minded, very atheistic, did not believe in a higher power or the power of energy, any of that. And at the same time, I was really suffering with my mental health. It started after the birth of my boys. They were calling it postpartum depression after my first, and postpartum anxiety after my second. But it became to the point where I couldn't function or mother or work without medication. And ultimately in 2017, I had a bipolar manic episode, at which point I was put on mood stabilizers, which in and of themselves were very, very harmful to my body and with really severe side effects. And at that point, I could not work. So I was in a partial hospitalization program. I was seeing multiple therapists. I was, had multiple psychiatrists. And I was starting to really feel hopeless. And, the suicidal thoughts, the loud, persistent, intrusive, horrible thoughts became harder to ignore. And I finally had to bravely say out loud, to my family and friends that I was suicidal. And really, and at that point is when, because after 9 years of doing it very traditionally, talk therapy, EMDR, DBT, all of which are fantastic, all of the pharmaceuticals that I took and I no longer do, but at the time they were life-saving. I would not have functioned without them. So, and it took me getting, as really anybody, to a crisis point, having really tried everything that you knew to try, for me to opened my mind, right? And opened my heart. And that started with the practice of intuitive eating.
Yeah.
That transitioned to the practice of yoga, not for weight loss for the first time, but for mindfulness and for inner peace. I did yin styles of yoga, and I became a yoga teacher. And then I had my suicidal crisis as a result of the bipolar mania and the fact that I was being essentially bullied to death by a group of close friends. And, you know, and at my lowest point, when I truly had no other options, I had a psychiatrist listen to my story, and instead of calling me bipolar, she told me I was traumatized. And she said I had complex PTSD, and I had never even heard of that. And to this day, it's not in the DSD, which is absurd and highly problematic. Because complex trauma, as I've come to understand both experientially and professionally, is the root of all these problems that everyone's really troubled about, right? Suicide, eating disorders, addiction, you know, deaths of despair from alcoholism, mental illness, chronic health conditions, especially autoimmune disorders, all rooted in trauma. And I know this not just because of my own traumatic childhood, but because of my work. I'm very proud to say I'm an original member of the NJEA State Task Force on Adverse Childhood Experiences. And I was I'm a certified presenter of their curriculum. And it has given me a foundational understanding that even the smaller T traumas, right? Just not feeling loved by your family, right? Just being verbally and emotionally abused instead of, you know, physically or sexually abused, right? That those traumas held weight in my nervous system, in my body, in my energy field. And as I said, it took a suicidal crisis. And then as I healed, mostly through yoga, about a year after I was back to work at that point, I had even started my company, which at that time I had just named Zen Mom Yoga, because I thought that I was just going to be teaching yoga to fellow stressed out moms. I had no idea what was coming, right? Including my own mental health breakdown and suicidal crisis. So I never got a memo ahead of time, right? So, but as I grew and healed, and yoga became a really sacred practice for me, even if I wasn't calling it a spiritual practice, it's an inherently spiritual practice, right? So you'll get it in the back door, right? And that studio was hosting a spirit medium. And I was really angry about that, because I didn't believe in spirit mediums. And I thought it was really unethical to charge people money to, you know, connect with loved ones. And because I have many loved ones on the other side, my dad included, for over 18 years at that point, I signed up. And I was like, well, either I'm going to be pleasantly surprised, which I doubted, or I'm going to figure out what this man's doing to trick people and call him out on it, because I'm a smart person, right? And the first time I met him, his name is Mitch Ott. He held my hand and he said, wow, do you do Reiki? And previous to that, I thought Reiki was absolutely ridiculous. As a physical therapist who believed in Western medicine to its, you know, to a fault, honestly, when my nurse friends or doctor friends or fellow physical therapists or occupational therapists were attuned to Reiki, I was like, what's that woo-woo BS, right? And so when Mitch first said, were you attuned to Reiki? I kind of snottily said, like, no, I'm a physical therapist and a yoga teacher. And he said, no, you're a healer and you could do what I do. And I walked into the room, and honestly, his assistant coming in and saying he was going to pray to the angels and would be into channel for us, I rolled my eyes and I was looking around the room thinking, like, who's buying this? And then he walked in the room, and it was as if every cell of my body responded to his energy. Like the crown of my head felt like it was gone, and a shower of energy was coming through my crown, and I was sweating and shaking and crying. And I had 20 witnesses of all of that, right? To the point where my people around me were concerned about me, because I was just so shocked by the intensity of what I was feeling. And the fact that he would walk close to me and I'd sweat and he'd move away from me and I would shiver, it was just, it was the first time I felt energy in such a strong way. And then he just told this really relatable story about being on drugs and homeless for years. And I'd struggled with alcohol for a very long time. And I've struggled with other things, with cannabis through my healing journey, just because I've that need to numb, that needs to distract from the pain, no matter the cost. Right. And, so he was just so relatable. And then he absolutely blew me away with the accuracy of his channeling, not just for my loved ones who had crossed over, but all the people around me. And it was just such an emotional experience. I call it my awakening. And that was November 7th, 2018. So about 6 years ago, or 5.5 years ago. And from that point on, I just took it as seriously as I'd taken my physical therapy career. I ran with it, and I believed in him and the fact that he believed in me. And I was privileged. Let me say that, privileged to get, Reiki training from some of the best teachers in the country, and to attend intuitive healing retreats with physicians, and other real deal Western doctors and healers finally opening their mind and integrating Eastern ancient wisdom, because the only reason this isn't common knowledge is because of white supremacy and colonization and, Christian missionaries and some really ugly history.
Yes. Listening to you just makes me emotional, I think, because it has to do with my own experiences too, as a child and growing up now. It's so sad that humans, we have this tendency or this legacy of abusing one another, of mistreating. Of course, we must be disconnected in order to do that.
Sure.
Right. So I guess, but let me ask you a question related to mental health and spirituality. Do you feel that all mental disorders are a calling for spiritual awakening or spiritual awareness?
I mean, it's hard to say all, those are words I try to stay away from. But I would say most, if not close to all. My view of mental illness now, honestly, is that it's a spectrum that we're all on. Because your mind is the problem. Your mind is all that shit you've picked up along your physical trail from your dysfunctional, toxic, possibly even abusive families, certainly from your toxic, sick society, especially if you don't have the privileges of white skin and male genitalia and a traditional, sexual and gender expression and a very rigid body type, right? I mean, there are very select people we give power to, in this world. And it's time to start admitting that, saying the quiet parts out loud, right? If we want to really get to the heart of the solution. So mental illness, again, is a spectrum we're all on. I think that's number one of the 10 tips we'll get to in a little bit. And that's to say that, and probably the biggest realization for myself, when I was being told I had bipolar disorder, that's because I was exhibiting symptoms that do fit in that category. I had a 6-day manic episode, or I couldn't sleep more than 2 hours out of 24. I was walking and talking, and it was a really exhausting, terrifying experience, honestly, and I don't deny that. But when I understood that was a manifestation of all the trauma that had preceded it, that I had been, quite frankly, gaslit out of believing was even traumatic. I was told how lucky I was my whole childhood,
right?
Because, and that's why the name of my book, that's very much a work in progress, is It Could Have Been Worse. Because that's the phrase that kept me sick for so long and helped me invalidate my trauma and compare myself to people who, yes, may have had it worse than me, but that doesn't mean that what happened to me wasn't horrible and impactful and caused long-term damage to my nervous system in its most developmental years, right? The problem is trauma, and then we have to stop negating the giftedness of people like myself, and I suspect you as well, who what they were seeing as a pathology in bipolar disorder was the fact that I feel energy. And when I'm not grounding that energy, it
Yeah.
spins out of control.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
People who they would be diagnosed as schizophrenic are hearing voices that are actually there. They're perceiving vibrations that others can't. I mean, your dog can smell things you
Yeah.
can't, thank goodness.
Right. Right.
Right? And you don't accuse it of faking, do you?
Yeah.
And yet, when it comes to humans, we have this honestly absurd view that all of us are exactly the same and are supposed to fit into a mold, whether that be, a body type or, even the word crazy is so stigmatizing. Fine, call me crazy. I'd rather be crazy than dead.
Yes.
Right? But
Right.
yes, I do
Right.
perceive things that you can't see. I do know things that I can't explain why I know them, other than that I'm tapped into higher levels of consciousness. I do know and treat and love and treat people who have hearing voices that are saying things that need to be validated. And are honestly you basically alluded to it, healers in training.
Yeah.
Healers have to first heal themselves. And in order to do that, they need to have access to the teachings that are going to be most beneficial.
Right.
Because things like breath work
Oh,
and
yeah.
Reiki and yoga and meditation and gratitude practices,
Yes. Yes.
these are free. I mean, Reiki's not typically free, but it's a pretty simple attunement. And once you're attuned to Reiki 1, you can heal yourself and others. I mean, I got that first certification, I believe, for $150, and
Yeah.
it's not a long process. So, these are and it was a miraculous addition to my physical therapy practice in its latest years. I mean, I went from being a good physical therapist to
Yeah.
being inexplicable to anyone who didn't understand what was happening energetically, in my ability to heal and help others. I mean, it was enough for me to walk away from the profession knowing that I had done as much as good as I could do, focusing only on the physical body, and I needed to work at a higher level in order
Right.
to truly unleash my gifts to the world.
So I want to thank you again, Kat, for being open to life. That's one of the things that I have to say is it's a big thing to be open, never to close our minds and our hearts when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
anything, really. And I know you answered that question. You said you stay away from the idea of all mental disorders being a calling for a spiritual awakening or spiritual awareness. I would say yes, because I really don't see this realm that we are here experiencing as a body mind as something that is natural. There's something inherently
Mm-hmm.
not natural because of the simple fact that we are not able to be in harmony with one another all the time. That doesn't make sense to me at a rational level, not just
Right.
the heart level,
Exactly.
soul level, but rationally it doesn't make sense. We
Not
all
logical.
right.
It's
It's
not
like
logical.
living in one house and not getting along. It doesn't make sense. So that really kind of it went back to the idea of what you call the ego. So it seems like we have lost the way. We have lost contact with our true nature, which is
Mm.
which knows what it is. Not even I don't want to say love, peace, or any of those concepts that can be rationalized again and put it in the box. But there's a sense of freedom to that. And it seems like we
Mm.
have lost contact with that which is already free, it doesn't dwell in fear. So that's mental disorders and everything else that comes with it has this underlying kind of fear element in it. It really does
Mm.
to me. I don't
Oh,
know. Yeah, I'd
absolutely.
love to hear from you just for a moment about that fear and all that.
Yes, absolutely. Your ego mind is, which are, two words that mean the same thing.
Yeah.
is your fear-based conditioning, right? It's the traumas. What makes it hard and brave to keep your heart open is when your heart has been hurt so many times. You've been given so many examples throughout your life of the opposite of love, right? Of harm, of fear, of abuse, right? And that's just a reality on our earth. And you're right, there's nothing natural about it. And yes, we might be technologically advanced, but we are spiritually broken, you know, and it's time to really marry the two, right? Of course, like, you know, it's I was so devoted as a Western medicine practitioner because, of course, there's been a lot of Western scientists who, through what I know to be source energy, have been inspired to incredible innovations and technologies that are benefiting lots of people on the planet. But let's not pretend that there's not an ancient history. I mean, the things that you and I are talking about were common knowledge 26,000 years ago.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, the Mayans knew this, right? You know, and so many other, and all the indigenous cultures. The ancient Egyptians knew so much they had to hide it from the world because if the wrong, in the hands of the wrong people and powers, it could have destroyed the world, that access to that type of energy and wisdom, right? But we're at a point on the planet, some are calling it the ascension, where there's a high enough level of consciousness among enough of us who now have access to the technologies that allow us for the very first time to, you know, to collaborate our wisdom, right? The only problem with all these indigenous cultures, ascended masters such as Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad, who got true information that was then bastardized and used for power, you know, used for the wrong purposes, and to maintain power structures. But they all had a piece of the puzzle, right? They all had but their inability to connect with one another like we have now was, you know, caused it to be compartmentalized. And then, as I said, because of white supremacy and genocide and some really ugly things that are very much still happening in the world, those ancient cultures and people were murdered and you know, enslaved and you know, made to work jobs for capitalist billionaires, right? For minimum wage, right? So, you know, it's just time to start getting honest about you know, where these things came from. And I would go so far as to call it love, right? That source energy vibration of what we are is unconditional love, which is why hate feels like crap. Because it's not the truth. And the greatest illusion of all, anyone who would resort to war or controlling another human being or enslaving another human being or abusing another being, like, yeah, hurt people, but, you know, not all of us who were hurt are hurting other people. So that's invalidating, right? We're one. We are one consciousness, right? Like, I grew up Catholic, and in Catholic school you take other religions, and it was the one thing that we had in common, right, with Judaism and with Islam, and was that we believed there was only one God, right? And the problem is that by believing that one God is judging you rather than is you, that power is higher than you instead of inside of you, right? It's not a higher power you're connecting to, it's an inner light, right? And that light can only shine through the broken shell of your ego. And your and I often say that the universe will give you a shove, and the universe will give you a nudge, and then the universe will give you a 2x4 to the face. You know, whatever whatever you need. The universe doesn't care about your comfort, it cares about your growth, right? And you're here to learn lessons, and you're here to persevere, and you're here, if you're a good person, to then turn around with, you know, after you've gotten through the fire, turn around with the bucket and go help the next person out too.
I love the way you answered that question about who you are. And you said, I think the first word you said was grateful, gratitude. So that's from that ground of love. It has to come from that place, being grateful. regardless. It's just, this is amazing to be here. And it really is in any way. Although we do
Yeah.
talk about ignorance and the ego, and, it seems like we are trying to get people to understand that they can return to their true nature and all that. But it's coming from that place to a freedom, isn't it? That we are just, what else to do here? What's more
Right.
fun than this? From my perspective, this is real fun, really.
Well, my favorite spiritual teacher, which is Abraham Hicks, also free and accessible on Google, says that we are so free that we can choose bondage. Right. And it's
Yes.
really our minds that are keeping us are keeping us in bondage. And that's not, I can already hear, the pushback in regards of course, that there are people who are actually physically enslaved. Right. And, that's very much still happening, and people are being trafficked. My partner in life was trafficked as a baby from Chile. And, that is very, very real. And the trauma of that is unspeakable. And I don't pretend to know that.
Yeah.
And I know that we really are, outside of these physical bodies and these minds, eternal beings that have come to learn lessons, and we don't get it right every lifetime. Right.
Yes,
And no one gets out of here alive. But I happen to know that on the other side of physical death is true freedom. Right. That's when you emerge back into the wholeness and the fullness of who you really are, which is in the frequency of the oneness of God or universe or divinity or soul, whatever word you most resonate with, right? And then you plan your next lifetime, and you come back. That's the nature of eternity. It's the nature of expansion, right? And these concepts that are well known, understood, and accepted in other cultures, right? Hinduism in India, there's no question whether there's reincarnation, right? We need to stop compartmentalizing wisdom and hating each other for our differences when we're supposed to revel in each other's differences, right? We're supposed to be our unique, authentic, weird, eccentric selves, and shine our lights. And some people aren't going to like it, and that's fine. And other people are going to be so inspired by it that they too are going to figure out how to connect with that inner truth, right? That you are only as free as you believe you are, right?
Yeah.
For the most of us who are living in this mental imprisonment of mental illness, right? Or addictions.
Yes, I love the way you talk about freedom, and what you said about choosing to be. We are free, that we're so free that we can choose to be in bondage. But then the issue there, I mean, the risk we take is to forget that we are free. And I think that's what happens. We just get so distracted, so happily in bondage, that we forget that we're free already. So let's go through the PDF that you have written. So the 10 things your mental health professional or religious leader won't tell you that might save your life. That's powerful. Is that also the title of your book? Would that be the title or something similar, Kat?
No, my book will eventually be called "It Could Have Been Worse," and that title I came to. It's of course a little bit provocative because I want people to be interested in reading it, but it's true. These are things that I have come to understand outside of my extensive study of both the mental health, traditional mental health paradigm as it stands today, and the religious paradigm as it stands today. Because my understanding of God was very bastardized by religion. It was honestly, it prevented me from seeking the truth for over 18 years. So let's get into it.
Gosh. Tell me about it. So I'll have the PDF is in front of me, so I'll be looking that way. But I'm right here. So the first one you already mentioned, mental health is a spectrum that everyone, including you, your therapist, psychiatrist, everybody is in. So talk to me a bit more about that. I know some people would say that they are not, that they are perfectly healthy when it comes even to having an ego, that have a healthy ego. Some people have said that.
There is such a thing, and run far away from any spiritual teacher or health or anybody who says they've dissolved their ego, because it's quite literally impossible to do that, right?
Yeah.
Your ego is honestly, you identify with your ego far more than you identify with your soul or your intuition, right? Because you have been taught that those thoughts are yours, that they're true, that they should be listened to, right? When in actuality, as we talked about earlier, they're the voice of your family, for better or for worse. They're the voice of your society, for better or for worse. They're the voice of your bullies. Of course, we always give so much more weight to our critics than to our supporters, right? So, who gets through childhood, even if you have a really loving, nurturing, safe family environment, who gets through high school or middle school or elementary school without being bullied, right? I mean, it's almost impossible, right? So that loud voice, I actually have dubbed it the itty bitty shitty committee. That voice that's constantly criticizing you, judging you, telling you what you did wrong, telling you how you're not good enough, telling you how you're not lovable, telling you you have to change your body, telling you, all of that muck is what mental illness sounds like. And it's just to varying degrees, right? Most of us have that to a slight degree, or I would say the majority would have it to a more slight degree. But then there's plenty of us that have been just horrifically abused throughout our entire lives, and we never known anything but conditional love, or or really emotionally and verbally and even physically and sexually abusive experiences, right? So, and I say that not to discourage people from getting a talk therapist. I'm currently seeking one, and it's been too long. But the reality is, don't put that person on a pedestal as if they are perfectly mentally healthy simply because they have a degree. And honestly, I have heard through my own work, why do I get more out of a 90-minute session with you than I do 20 years of therapy? And it's like, because I'm not just talking through your trauma, because as another item on the list says, perhaps the next one, talking about trauma doesn't heal trauma. In fact, it can be re-traumatizing.
Yes, yeah, you did say that. Yeah, that's so true. It is. It has been recognized actually by some therapists. I interview a lot of them, and they do talk about that too. So, what would a healthy ego look like, Kat? Just as an example.
Well, you're meant to have an ego to function in this matrix, in the sense of, you, without your mind, you couldn't do math, you couldn't, comprehend directions, you couldn't reason things out and be logical, right? There's obviously a need, right, to think, right? But if all you believe you are is your mind, and you don't understand that through mindfulness practices, you can release that overthinking mind and just be present in this moment. And through that, there's tremendous power and ability to connect with your inner soul, right? Like probably the biggest obstacle most people have to making that connection is being silent or undistracted. When do we have the ability to be silent and undistracted anymore? Unless it's in a yoga room, or you have the privilege of not working multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, right? So these are very much privileges that shouldn't be privileges, but by design they are. Because if you really get quiet and you ask the hard questions, and you pray, and then you meditate to listen to the answers, your life is going to shift in a way that you might love, but a lot of people around you are going to start to protest because a lot of people in your life, especially if you suffer with mental illness or addictions, you've probably been under the control of dysfunctional families, if not, and certainly dysfunctional institutions.
Right.
The mental health system, unfortunately, among them.
Oh, yes, yeah. And I did have a conversation yesterday exactly about that. How it sounded to me like torture, a lot of the treatments that for mental
Yeah.
health in the past.
Oh
Gosh,
my
I could
gosh.
not believe how bad it was. And they are not illegal at this time. They're still legal. Like,
And a 5150 hold is essentially, an imprisonment against a
yeah,
person's will. I mean, with
yeah.
forced medications that are just horrific. I have a friend who was forced to get Haldol injected into his veins for a full year. He said it was the worst experience every week. And he
Mm.
would walk out of there feeling like a zombie. And it was just, it's so horrific. Look at Britney Spears. Look what
Yeah,
happens
right.
once you're labeled mentally ill. It's a crime. It's a real crime.
Yeah, I love the way you mentioned one of the items. You do mention that we are not the body, we're not the mind. I'm a I'm a student of Advaita Vedanta. I don't know if you heard about this. It's a Hindu spiritual philosophy. Have you heard about? It's a non-dualist, non-duality.
I didn't hear the name of it. I'm sorry.
Oh, you haven't. Okay, it's exactly that. We are not the body and the mind. What you said here, it's just so Vedanta. You are the consciousness that is aware of and experiencing both. So
Yeah.
awareness, pure consciousness is what we are. It's not even who, but what. And the only reason that this resonated with me with Vedanta too is because it's something in me was telling my entire life that this was just an appearance, was just like a dream-like reality. It was always coming back to me, that message, and I had no idea from where and how I got that information. But then I came across Vedanta, and that's exactly how they explain this reality and the absolute reality and all that.
Yeah, an analogy I like to use for that is, your mind are the weather, right? The
Right.
mind is the storm. The mind is the tsunami, maybe. Depending on where you're at, right? Your mind maybe be a very pleasant place to be, like on a nice sunny day, or maybe it's a horrible, storm that feels life threatening. But
Yeah.
you are the sky, right? When you take off in a plane through a rainstorm, eventually you hit through those
Mm.
clouds and there's the
Mm.
sun. It didn't leave. It's just being covered up, right? That's what your mind is doing to your consciousness,
Mm.
right? The most modern term I think we can use for it is consciousness, right? And it's so telling that, I grew up, I believe it's Plato, I don't know, don't quote me on that, but who
Yeah.
said that I think, therefore I am. And that was, it was introduced in my schooling days. I'm 45. So, I was being schooled in the 1980s and 90s. And it was as if that's such a profound statement, and I'm sorry, but he's wrong. You're
Yeah.
thinking, but it's the fact that you're aware of that you're thinking that is you. It's the awareness of your thoughts that is the real you, that is the eternal you,
Right.
right? That it's essentially, you are the universe peering through your eyes, observing it
Mm.
through your own perspective. And the body is temporary. We all know that, right? There's bodily death. Thank goodness the mind goes along with it. And then we reemerge into the true essence, energy, frequency,
Yeah.
vibration,
Yeah.
soul, consciousness, whatever word you want to use, right? There's been so many different cultures and generations through the millennia of human existence on Earth that have been describing the same things in different words. And it's so nice to know that the Indian culture had more wisdom than Plato. But of course, we gave Plato the microphone because he was a white man.
Mm. Ha. I should not make a comment on that. You can make a comment on that, Kat. I should not say anything because I'm
Happy
not white.
to. Happy to.
Yeah, thank you. So, yes, that's a beautiful way of saying, right? The sky, that's what we are, and then everything else, the clouds and the weather, however, that's a very good way of explaining that, which sounded very abstract to me when I started studying all this. But
Mm,
then one of the things that really one of the examples, the closest that I can kind of get to, even to communicate what it looks like, consciousness in relation to experience. We cannot experience consciousness. It's something because is everything that it is experienced is in consciousness. So
mm,
you can't
yeah.
really pin down. It's not a thing. Consciousness is not an object.
I would say consciousness is the awareness of what you're experiencing, right? And the awareness
Yeah.
of what you're experiencing is going to expand as you raise your vibration and you expand your consciousness. You know, I have a
Mm.
much higher level of consciousness today through a lot of energetic and emotional and mental work, and our experiences and awareness changes and grows and expand, and that's the nature of life. That's a beautiful thing, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, when I was sick and I was, really fighting for my life, one of the things that my friends used to say to me that makes no logical sense is, you've changed, like really weaponizing that word at me, like, I've changed. And it's like, well, thank goodness I've changed, like,
Yes. Yeah.
not only was I miserable and drinking way too much and using
Yeah.
pharmaceuticals in a way, really dangerous pharmaceuticals, rather than free and safe and effective holistic methodologies, um, and change is the damn point of life. Like, like,
Mm. Mm.
so yeah, so I just have I have a much different definition, I guess, than most. And even if you just think about
Right.
the word personality, right?
Yeah.
Personality, that's your personal reality,
Mm. Oh, I never
right?
thought of that way, but yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
Ah.
it's not fixed. It's mutable.
Right.
I feel like I've lived 4 lifetimes in one, to be honest. I mean, I have changed
Yeah.
so dramatically, as anyone from my past would be happy to point out. And I'm proud of it. And I hope to inspire a lot of other
Mm.
people to change in this way, which is to become more authentic, because the price of not doing so literally is dis-ease,
Oh,
right?
yes. Yeah.
Disease in the body, disease in the mind,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. As you said, yeah, they do use the word awareness for consciousness, not Vedanta, though. I think some Vedanta teachers, modern teachers, they do use the word awareness, and that makes sense too. So we become aware of other realities that we are not aware of. So that changes everything, because now it's not your reality, the one that we used to live in, that felt so constricted and fearful and sad. Now it's different. It's lighter. It's brighter. It's enjoyable. There's so much love. So yeah, and I don't think it ends, because what would be the alternative, really, Kat? So if consciousness is everything's in consciousness, and it just keeps appearing, as a dream does at night when we go to sleep.
Well, even, I mean, as I said, I was schooled in the 1980s and 90s. And even back then, we were told that the energy is not created nor destroyed,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And since then, our findings in quantum physics and string theory have shown that everything is vibrating energy, and that we're all
Yeah.
interconnected, literally from Earth to the, furthest regions of space that we even know about, which in my lifetime, if there was one thing that was going to pull me out of atheism prior to meeting Mitchat, it was the fact that with these inventions of these incredible telescopes and stuff, we can really understand, because I really believed, I don't know if this is what I was being taught, but it's what
Yeah.
I was a 4.0 student. So I guess I was getting the information they were giving me. And I was told there were 9 planets, and then that went
Mm.
down to 8. And
Yeah.
there was a moon and there was a sun and maybe some other moons around the other planets. But beyond that, right? And then when we started to realize that the Earth is literally a speck of dust,
Mm.
size wise, compared to the
Yeah.
largest known stars. And again, just the known universe at this point, there's such a vastness and intelligence that even the smartest humans on the planet couldn't touch.
Mm.
The intelligence, the divine intelligence that it takes to keep, just in our little galaxy, the planets spinning in perfect proximity to one another, to keep
Yeah.
the people
Yeah.
on Earth alive, right? And the idea that we're the only intelligent species out there is terrifying, because we're not that
Yeah.
intelligent. As a whole, we're not that intelligent.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Mm.
it's time to start taking all of these pockets
Yeah.
of knowledge and and wisdom, and integrate, right, into common sense practices, right? We need to start bringing emotional intelligence and energy healing and mindfulness into our schools, starting in
Yes.
preschool. Right? It's got to
Yes.
happen. It's got to happen. And especially because the children, the newer, the newer generations are always going to be coming in at a higher level of consciousness. And the veil is so thin right now
Mm,
between the 3D physical realm and the invisible world, which is the vast majority of reality, that kids can see spirits, kids can hear spirits, and they're not gaslighting themselves out of it anymore.
right.
They're like, what are you talking about? They're right there. I mean, there's a mass awakening happening on the planet as we speak, and it's about damn time.
Yes, I agree. 1,000,000,000%. Yes, I feel the same way. So we talked about trauma and some of the items. Talking about trauma doesn't heal trauma. And in fact, it can be traumatizing. So we talked about this. Unhealed traumas, repressed emotions, and energy blockages are the root cause of all disease. So we talked
Mhm.
about. Did we talk about this?
Yeah, I alluded to that one, and it's fine. It's fine. Don't read everything so that they want to go to my website and
Oh
download
yeah,
it for
right. I don't want
themselves.
to. Yeah, review everything. That's a good point. That's a good
These
point.
are teasers.
Yes,
You're going to have to go
yes,
to my website in order
yes.
to read everything. So,
That's true.
but yes, I did allude to that before, that I now know, and as someone who was, educated formally as a physical
Yeah.
therapist, worked for almost 20 years as a physical therapist, truly believe we were just these physical bodies. I'm sorry that my, that theory went to the curb when I really understood energy. And yes, it is our unhealed traumas, our energy blockages, and our emotional repression that is
Yeah.
causing the physical and mental health symptoms that we're focusing on. But the problem is, that's like calling the fire department and having them blow the smoke around. If they don't put out the fire, the symptoms are going to persist.
Right.
So yes, we can treat the body as, with pharmaceuticals and healing and life-saving things that are great, but then we have to also work on the energy body, right? We also have to address that person's sense of safety at home and in the
Yeah.
world. We have
Yeah.
to address all the root causes of illness and disease, not just for the privileged classes on the planet.
Right. 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 Gosh, Kat, you have so much to teach all of us.
Thank
It's
you.
a reminder to.
And so much to learn too.
Yeah.
I'm very teachable.
Yeah. I love that too. That's humility, isn't it? It's part of the freedom, the love, the unconditional love,
Mm,
wisdom. That's universal wisdom.
yeah.
So I want to thank you for everything that you've been doing and how open you have been to universal intelligence and
Mm.
returning to the beautiful foundation of what we call life and a lot of people are not in touch with. So I really appreciate that because it's a very lonely in a way kind of journey, isn't it? Path in a way when we realize
Oof.
certain truth and then we're like, gosh, I have nobody to talk about it. And the people that we talk about it, they don't understand or they push us
Yeah.
away. And that's why I started this podcast, because I couldn't really talk to so many people about the things that I have found to be true. So thank you so much for saying
Oh, and you're so welcome.
yes.
And it's why the name of my company is Compassionate Healing Services, because compassion, we have to just lead with
Yeah.
compassion and realize that our struggles are universal and they're
Yeah.
shared, and no
Right.
one is ever going through something alone, even if it feels that way. There's always somebody else that is struggling through something similar. And due to the internet and other technological advances, we have more access to this information than ever. And I thank you so much for doing your part and inviting me to be here. And I feel like we could talk for days. So,
I know. Yeah, exactly. Gosh. Yeah. Tell me about it.
so, and I do want to promote my own
Yeah.
show. So
Yes.
if you do think I have a lot to teach and say, then please join me. I was invited to a show on the Bold Brave TV network. I'm
Yes.
calling it That's All I Know So Far, and it is premiering on March the 7th at 1 p.m. That's a Thursday. It'll be a live hour. You can call in or submit questions ahead of time. And I'm going to do my best to disseminate a lot of myths that are harming a lot of people and get back
Yes.
to the truth and back to community and back to love and back to higher levels of consciousness.
Yes. So the information about your show will be on your website, right, Kat?
Yeah.
Cat Schwarz.
As soon as I put it there. But by the time this premieres, it should be there.
Okay. So that's good to know. I'll have the website and podcast notes. I want to mention your services too. So you are located in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Individual healing sessions in office and virtual. Also, you offer 5-session consultation and comprehensive treatment package in spiritual private investigation. That was so intriguing to me.
Yes, it's my highly unique form of mediumship that I love sharing with people.
Yeah, what's not to love about all that you're up to? So thank you so much again, Kat. Is there anything that you'd like to, that you left unsaid that you would like to say before we say goodbye for today?
I guess I would just like to say that for anyone struggling severely with mental health issues, with suicidal ideation, with addictions, with eating disorders, with any of the things that I myself have struggled, please know that there is hope, that there is, and that you are worthy of healing. And you are worthy of being validated for all that you are, including the weird parts of you. And, especially the weird parts of you, right? Where we're done with a time of conforming, right? And it's time for us to all shine our own unique lights, and the people that are going to be attracted to it and magnetized to it, or for you, and everyone else isn't, and that's okay. And let's get back to that idea of oneness and harmony and supporting one another instead of sabotaging and abusing one another. And please join me for That's All I Know So Far.
Yes. Thank you so much again, Kathy. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Valeria. It was such a